Well, hey there, and welcome to Thoughtful Tuesday Turnaround. My name is Jen Trum, and I am a human resources leader for over 23 years and also a certified life coach. And this series is really about helping all of us be able to turn around some of the thought patterns that get us stuck. And Tuesdays are one of those days that get us stuck. So, what better day than Tuesday to be able to reframe some of the things that get us stuck? Today's episode is a follow-up to another podcast and live series that I do called Thrive and Shine HR. And that's a series that I do each week with Catherine Fry, who is also a certified life coach and has been in the field of human resources for over 25 years. And so she and I are able to connect on topics that we don't see a whole lot in the field of human resources. And so it's so much fun to have the conversations that we do together because we're really able to go into topics that truly matter. Yesterday's episode of Thrive and Shine HR was actually a repeat because she and I have been doing a little vacation time. I just hit my 50th. We had a family reunion. So it was just not the time to do a recording. So here I am recording this episode as a follow-up to a repeat on forgiveness. So I am asking for your forgiveness that we didn't have a new episode of Thrive and Shine HR. I know she and I have been so consistent since we started in January, and now we're at episode 20, and we've kind of hit a couple of bumps in terms of timing on getting episodes. We're working that out. We're going to get that back on track. And in the meantime, this series is really about kind of then jumping on whatever topics that Catherine and I talk about the day before and really expand on it. And it's not so much about the field of HR or whatever field we're in. It's really about taking a concept like forgiveness and really talking about how it applies to us and how we show up in our day-to-day lives, right? And where we might be holding on to the things that are keeping us from really being able to let go and move on and be able to kind of expand upon what is possible. So what I want to do today is first, I want to share a little bit of a story around something that happens to every single one of us and something that I think is just important that when these things happen in our lives, when we own them and we just call it out for what it is, it's so much easier not only to forgive ourselves and be able to say, it happened, it's fine, we can move on, but it also is such a beautiful opportunity to show others how much we will take that responsibility. And that modeling, I think, is really one of the first things that I wanted to hit on, with the series today. So let me tell my little story. So I was off for a week last week, which was incredible. Got to spend some time with family down in California who I hadn't seen in quite some time. It's been a bit of a turbulent couple of years in my family. So coming back together and spending time together was really special. It really meant a lot. And so with the kind of anticipation and maybe some worry that I had going into the week of being around quite a bit of family again, I forgot to do my out of office for my email at work. So I'm an HR manager for about 165, 70 employees, and I forgot. So I go on a week-long vacation. I'm pretty much cut off from a lot of technology. Well, not so much, but intentionally so. I cut myself off from technology. Didn't think a thing about it. Came back yesterday to a bit of a mess. A bit of a mess, if I'm being honest, but that's okay. And one of those things that was a mess was the not knowing around me being out in a couple of cases. And so, boy, was that a kind of a frustrating thing to catch myself on something that typically in the past and in jobs previous, that's always something I am dialed in on. Always something I would do. I want to make sure people are aware if I'm going to be out, they're going to know I'm out. So it was just a miss, right? And so that letdown that I caused other individuals because they weren't able to count on me. They weren't able to rely on me at a time when they expected, they didn't have any reason not to think that I wasn't going to be available. So after I kind of processed through a little bit of embarrassment, a little bit of anger for myself, frustration for myself, when I was able to kind of process through those emotions, and I'm not going to lie, one of the emotions that I had to process through was like, well, screw them. They don't understand. They don't know. They'll be fine. They'll get over it. There's like this natural tendency, I think, in all of us sometimes when we've been kind of called out to then deflect, right? That deflecting back of like that immediate defensiveness. And I think I caught myself doing that yesterday, and that's completely normal, but it's kind of funny too to be able to still see where my brain goes, and immediately it's like, not me, it's you. Why is this my problem? So anyway, once I got through kind of those different steps of, my emotional recoil after that happened, I was able to like settle in and recognize that two things needed to happen. One, I needed to forgive myself. It happened. It's not my typical, but it happened. Let it go and move on. And then two, after I sip of water, two is own it with others. Own it with those who I may have let down in some way. Don't just gloss it over. Don't just move past it. Take a moment and actually lean into it and say, I'm sorry. Sorry that I dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry I missed that email. I'm sorry I didn't follow up on that. Whatever that looks like. And I think for me, and I think for so many others, that is like, it's the hardest part, right? It's the hardest part because it requires us to have, a sense of vulnerability that for many of us, we didn't grow up with a whole lot of it. So it feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward. And yet, one of the things that I've been learning, I'm now an active member of AA because I used to be a heavy drinker. And with being in AA, one of the things that I'm really learning very clearly is how important it is to make amends. Regardless of how big of a deal it might seem to me, if anybody else feels hurt in any way, or there is any sort of kind of frustration or misalignment from the circumstances, lean into it. Lean into it and make an opportunity to build a bridge rather than whatever might be disconnecting the alignment of communication or whatever it is. So that to me was a huge, huge kind of shift over the last, year or so in my life. And I did that. So that's kind of the step that I took yesterday, and I'm still taking, because obviously yesterday was my first day back. Today is now Tuesday. So many things on my shoulders that, I need to catch up on after a week of vacation, but this is going on my priority list. And because, it's really because, going back to the conversation that Catherine and I had on that second episode of Thrive and Shine HR, that forgiveness is such a key and critical component to how we build and nurture the relationships that we have in our workplaces and in our homes and within ourselves. And so the beauty of, Catherine and I and the work that we have done through coaching is that we will always, always, always bring it back to ourselves, because we know that just like the oxygen mask on the plane, we have to make sure that we're aware of what might be holding us back in any of the areas that we're trying to then help and serve and support others. Because as HR professionals or as coaches or as whatever we might be doing out in the world, how we show up really does matter. And if we're holding on within ourselves a lack of forgiveness, a lack of great uncertainty and things like that, that ends up projecting in ways that many times we're not even fully aware of. So the more that we can dial in, the more that we can get on a track that helps others see that we are doing our work just as much as we're encouraging them to do their own. And that is a pretty powerful thing. So what I want to do is go over a few things that I think can help anybody who may see themselves in a position that they may be struggling to forgive. that they might be struggling to let go. So if you see yourself and you recognize, especially in the work environment, let's kind of play with that a little bit. Think about those individuals perhaps that might get on your nerves. Think about those scenarios and situations that you're really struggling with because of past circumstances that have really let you down, that have really frustrated you. Think about those for a moment and pay attention to what it is specifically that you're having difficulty with letting go. And when you start kind of tuning into that, there's something about that that can really help unlock some things that perhaps could not only serve you, but could dramatically help serve situations. And so I've really recognized that within myself, where if I have noticed that there is a particular individual or there's a particular activity that I need to do that I really don't want to do, I'll really, really pay attention to that and find out, okay, what is it that I am holding on to? And for me, one of the things that I have noticed is that if I have had an interaction, if I've had circumstances happen with an individual where I have felt that they have not really shown care or concern or consideration for me, if I've expressed my needs or my wants or my ask in some way, and an individual, a good example of this is, around COVID, right? And when COVID first happened, everyone's putting on the mask, it's mandated. I mean, obviously there was a lot of drama around it, but when things became mandated, there was no question, or the question then became clear because it was in black and white. And as restrictions have released over the last few years, or last couple of years, what we're really finding is within organizations, we're having to really kind of figure out this moral dilemma, right? Is, as a collective, where do we feel responsible to ensure that our employees, one, are physically safe as much as possible, and two, feel psychologically safe as much as possible. And so when it comes to others and the environments that we work in, and where many times people in the past, prior to COVID, there was never conversation necessarily around, masks and, consideration for communication when, people are ill, and making sure others around them know, so then that way they can isolate if needed. And, all of those things, I think we're still in a lot of awkwardness. And so when people find themselves in situations where it triggers them, right? So we have situations where I work where there are people who feel very strongly on one side of the fence and still very strongly on the other side of the fence. COVID being long in the past has certainly not solved those issues. Am I right? And so now here we are, and still finding ourselves in the middle of June, almost the end of June, and still finding ourselves in circumstances where, when individuals are choosing to come into a workplace environment, they're coming into a collective environment around other people, and then choosing not to communicate that they're under the weather or wear a mask. And so we're really at a very sticky point where there's a lot of heated emotions, and a lot of things start to come up that have been building up over time. So what I'm finding is then when an individual now feels as though others are deliberately choosing not to care about them because their choice not to wear a mask if they're feeling under the weather, now all of these things start to come up. And it's something that I've noticed so many times when working with employee relations issues, right? It's never just the tapping of the pencil. It's never just the clicking of the pen, right? It's always these deeper things that might have been going on for quite some time that they're holding on to. And what I have found both in my HR career and also in my coaching career is that there's something that has hurt them. There is something that has bothered an individual where they have feel though they need to kind of defend, they need to have a protection around them. So these triggers are so fascinating because any triggers that might annoy us or frustrate us and feel like we are kind of losing our cool is such a great opportunity to really kind of recognize something else is going on. There's something else within our emotional bodies creating these triggers that is causing us to think it's the pin click or it's the tapping, right? And so when we really start to recognize that, that is where the power of awareness and the power of forgiveness comes in. I think that ended up being kind of a long circle around of being able to kind of talk about the gifts that I believe that HR professionals have, and really anybody who is in a leadership position, in a coaching position, to be able to start to recognize when we work with individuals and we have to help people collaborate, cohabitate, all the things. Part of that includes recognizing and being able to unearth what might be holding us back and keeping us stuck from being able to move on from things that might have hurt us, that might have bothered us in a pretty deep way, right? And it would include things around our sense of safety. And so, yeah, I kind of went on in a tangent on that one. But so I wrap up, kind of that piece to just really say that I think a true leader is aware of the safety of everybody they lead and actually everyone they touch within their leadership role. And I think that it's a heavy weight to carry, but it's also one that can be shared so beautifully. So anyway, let's move on and talk about the 5 things that I think that anybody who struggles with forgiving, anyone who struggles with moving on when they've been hurt or they feel stuck could really be able to unlock themselves and hopefully be able to turn around. So number 1 is modeling forgiveness. Modeling forgiveness really looks like Pink, who is a music artist who is one of my absolute favorites. I have had the opportunity to see Pink live one time, and it was the most amazing concert of my life. It was so much fun. One of the things Pink talks about is that she is a fierce advocate for radical forgiveness. And radical forgiveness means being able to check in with ourselves anytime something is a little off with any relationship that matters to us, and being willing to go in as far as we need to ensure that we're owning whatever it is we need to own that perhaps that other individual may not even be fully aware of. And so sometimes it requires us to really be asking questions like, well, what else? What else can I know about the situation that can help me learn and understand? Because when it comes to modeling forgiveness, a lot of times we're not going to know what we don't know. And so if, let's say, you're in a meeting and you notice Susie on the other side of the room get a little agitated when you start talking about the monthly numbers in some way, right? So at the end of the meeting, you're thinking, I noticed Susie was like a little frustrated. I don't know why. 9 times out of 10, I know for me in the past, 9 times out of 10, in my head, I'll be like, ask him behind. Susie will be fine. Everything will be fine. We'll get together, in the next week. And, if there's anything we need to smooth out, we'll smooth out. And on the flip side of it, right, there's something going on with Susie, but yet for whatever reason, she chooses not to address it. Maybe she's hoping that it's addressed by you, whatever the reason, right? So she then also decides to push it down. So you've kind of pushed it aside and said, I'm sure Susie will get back to me if it's really that important. And Susie has chosen to push it down. So that what was kind of really a little thing in the grand scheme of things now has then kind of expanded upon itself and has only kind of exasperated something potentially deeper that may be going on within that relationship. And so through AA, again, I've really, really been learning this idea of kind of radically going in and saying, hey, Susie, can we chat for 5 minutes? It's 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, whatever it is it takes for us just to circle up in those moments where we have the opportunity to ensure there's not something that we're missing. And it's really that simple. And that's what modeling forgiveness for me looks like. All right, number 2, facilitating open communication. I think this is the same thing. Me being an HR, me being a coach, me being somebody who has been in a leadership position now for quite a few years, this is an area that I'm still working on, but I find over the last couple of years in particular that I'm starting to kind of get a little bit better at it. So it takes a lot of practice. And where it's at is, how do you facilitate open communication when you are recognizing the conflict within others, and how can you help open that up through the opportunities of forgiveness and recognizing what individuals may be holding on to. So in the context of my HR role, or even in a leadership role, let's say you're working with 2 individuals from a couple different departments, you're collaborating on a project, and you're noticing this tension between the 2. One of them feels as though the other has been late multiple times on things, has not been very communicative, and you can kind of sense that, but it's more coming out passive aggressively, and it doesn't really have so much to do with you necessarily. You're just more a part of the team. What do you do? Right? And I think me in past versions of myself would be very quick to brush over, to not necessarily address something, that perhaps is none of my business. And now as I've grown and I feel like I've gained the wisdom, I can now be able to delicately, respectfully and carefully, that's delicately and carefully, call out things that I'm noticing, and not in a way where I'm trying to fix it or I'm demanding that it be fixed, but rather from a place of bringing awareness to something that perhaps they either are not aware of, or perhaps they're trying to intentionally, some of our intentional behaviors that are misguided, right? The passive aggressiveness and things like that. So bringing just attention and awareness to something, I think, has been a very, very effective tool. And then from there, I can offer support. I can offer to mediate. I can offer to do anything that they would collectively want to do, but they would have to select that. And it wouldn't be something that I would be pushing upon them. So anyway, that type of facilitating opportunities to forgive, opportunities to bring out potentially what might need to be forgived, those are something that I'm still working on and I'm still building. And if you are as well, I applaud you. And if you're not yet, give it a try, because I think you will be pretty amazed at how the impact could really help shift dynamics. All right, number 3, conflict resolution training. Hey, all right, I could definitely use this. It's been several years since I've really had intensive direct conflict resolution training. I remember we had some training when I was in an organization years ago, and it was on nonviolent communication. And at the time, I was really taken aback by the idea of nonviolent communication. And now I'm really much more understanding, and I'm aware it's not about nonviolent communication. It's more about how the words that we use and the weight that they carry, the tone that we use and the weight that it carries. And violence can come in the form of, as I shared earlier, psychological safety. So if somebody feels threatened in some way, they feel as though their job's at risk, their career is at risk, and our tone or our behavior or our attitude or our words is somehow causing that individual to feel threatened, that matters. That matters. And so how we bring that out, how we become aware of that, how we just become more educated in that matters. So yeah, I'm in the process of wanting to get more training in that area. So if you are aware of any real good conflict resolution trainings and want to pass that information along, I'd be happy to include it in the show notes. All right, number 5, implement restorative practices. So one of the things I am really, really proud of, it's really, I think, the thing that I'm most proud of in the career that I'm at right now, or the job I'm at the co-op I work at in Ashland, Oregon, is in the process of creating things that truly can make a difference. We're in the process of doing a couple of those right now. One of them around what we were talking about earlier, a contagious and communicative, a contagious illness policy, and something that really, I think, is going to matter for our employees, for our customers, and for our identity of who we are and what matters to us collectively. And then the other policy we're in the process of creating, really for the first time, creating it in a way that I think is going to align with our culture, with our employees, and that is around our harassment and discrimination policy. It's a big one. It's a really, really big one, but it's one that truly matters, and one that I think, when it comes to restorative practices and it comes to how we show up in moments of crisis, there are so many opportunities, I think, within the policy that they had. And it was one that got carried over for many, many years around a lot of mindsets that have shifted over many, many years. So it's okay that we're, at a place where we're now rewriting some of this stuff. And it's also understandable that there's going to be resistance and there's going to be pushback. And it's not going to be just a yellow brick road running to make changes to these types of policies. But when it comes to restorative, the idea of how we can really be able to meet people where they're at, how we can really be able to support people who have been through traumatic and difficult circumstances. There's so many, directions that I can go with that. But basically, the idea is wanting to really take a newer and more evolved mindset around how we respond in situations. And I think when it comes to people who show up sick, just as much as, how we show up when people are mistreated. And so, yeah, more to come on that. Those are both something I'm working on now, but something that I think, within my role in HR, and anybody who really is in a leadership role, is always those opportunities of asking, are we doing enough? Is there enough here where we really can help people feel safe to come forward? Is there enough here where we really have created enough to help people feel as though others are being held accountable for their actions and behaviors, especially when it comes to our care and concern of one another? These are all things that I think truly matter. And so the more that we talk about it, the more that we can then collectively get on the same page around what then gets communicated for the future generations of our workplace. All right, last one, and that is around just being open ourselves. And one of the things that I have done pretty religiously over the last few years is daily meditation. And I've talked about it in the other podcasts, and I've talked about it here, I think, as well. And the reason that I think meditation for me is so important, and I was just talking with my boss about this yesterday. I love having someone I report to who I can have conversations about things like meditation and about awareness and that sort of thing. And so what we were talking about is this idea that so many of us have, that we just do not have enough time to slow down long enough to breathe, to get calm, to give space, I think. Meditation, the idea of meditation is just really finding a way to give space to all of the chaos that we have going on. And every single one of us can find ourselves in spinouts. And how we find our way back to kind of regulation or being regulated is really a unique journey. For my boss, it's more about walking meditations, or it's about other types of active activities that he engages in. Whereas for me, I have a very good, habit that I've gotten into where I just stop everything. And some days, some days it's really, really hard. Some days my monkey brain is just so freaking wired that it just won't slow down. But other days, those are the days that I think the greatest gifts I could be given can be given to me, because they're the opportunities, or they're the times where I'm able to see more clearly the areas that perhaps I may have missed before. And they're also the times where I can have that space to see more clearly the things that perhaps I may need to be paying more attention to for the future. And both of those, I think, when we find a way to come into ourselves, again, call it meditation, call it whatever, but that regular process of checking in with ourselves, that bringing of kind of where we've been with who we are and where we're going, is a powerful daily reflection that I so encourage every single, person I ever meet and talk to and touch and love to engage in, because it's the daily reflection that allows us to recalibrate the person we want to be. And that is a choice we get to make daily. And when we're not doing that, I know it because I've lived it over and over again. And just talking with my boss about it, and we've both lived it over and over again. If there is not a daily intention to calibrate yourself with what you've been through, what are you holding on to? What self-judgments, what blame, what is it you're holding on to that you're having trouble letting go? And then aligning that with where you want to go. And then finding that equilibrium right here, right now, in the present moment. Holy crap. Talk about finding ways to unlock yourself in ways that are completely next level. And so when it comes to forgiveness, and when it comes to what we might be holding on to that's keeping us from expanding to that next level, this is where it's at. This is where it's at, because when you can kind of start to become more aware of those things around Susie's annoying behavior, you can start to see that pin click is really so much more of an opportunity to lean in and engage in a different way than perhaps you have in the past. And it's been easier to kind of let go and push down and deflect and all of that. It's been easier. It's hard. It is not easy to actually engage and go in and be able to kind of work through some of these things that are keeping us stuck. But when we do, the gifts will be aplenty. So with that, I would like to sign off and encourage you that if you in your life, you're feeling stuck, you're holding on to things that you're really having a hard time letting go of, I would love the opportunity to connect with you. Let's get on a call. We can talk for 15 minutes. We can talk for 30 minutes, but I'd love to just check in with you. And perhaps it may not be with me that you would want to do further coaching, but at the very least, I'd be happy to help support you on what direction you feel like would help you to help unlock some of the things that might be holding you back. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you enjoyed today's Thoughtful Tuesday turnaround. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
As certified life coaches,